Okay, so apparently there's this thing that's been going around called Stop Killing Games, and it's getting a ton of traction, and people are arguing about it. And so some people on my team said, like, hey, Ben, what do you think about this? So I'm going to be reacting to this. Now, I have read a little bit of this website already, so this isn't a pure react, but I haven't read that much of it. I just kind of skimmed it. So I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to just talk about this idea of stop killing games as it hits me. So you're just going to get a pretty raw opinion on this. Again, I know that there's some debate happening. So here we go. Okay, Stop Killing Games. There we go. Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers. I've never had a publisher attempt to destroy a game I own. So that's an interesting first statement. An increasing number of video games are sold effectively as goods with no stated expiration date, but designed to be completely unplayable as soon as support from the publisher ends. They're not, no. I mean, they're kind of sold as goods. They're goods based on preconditions. If we stopped using gas and I still had a gas car, like based car, everybody went to electric or something, and I still had a gas-based car, I couldn't use my car anymore. But it was sold to me as a good. Doesn't mean it was designed to be unplayable as soon as gas stopped being a way we filled cars up. Okay. This practice is a form of planned obsolescence and is not only detrimental to customers, but makes preservation effectively impossible. Furthermore, the legality of this practice is largely untested in many countries. Oh boy. Okay, so a form of planned obsolescence. Obsolescence. I don't think so. I don't think it's a form of planned obsolescence. I think ideally most studios would love it if their games just went on into perpetuity, but they cost money to run or maintain. So when they stop generating enough money to pay for that, then you don't get it anymore. Now you still have it if you have a disc. You technically could still have the download on like a hard drive if you kept the hard drive or the data. The data is still technically out there, but this isn't killing games. I guess maybe some companies do that. I don't know. I'll keep reading, but I'm thinking about like how you'd kill a game, and it would be, let's say people mostly buy games online, so it's a digital good of some sort. There are a lot of digital goods, and many of them are transitory because they're digital goods. But let's say you bought a game on Steam, and the publisher deliberately released like a last patch that just ruined the game file, or uninstalled most of it and just left this little text file saying we've deleted your game, or whatever they did. That would be the killing of the game, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's happening. Okay, let's see. Over the past year, we have successfully escalated complaints on this problem. So we assume this is a problem to consumer agencies in France, Germany, and Australia, and have brought forth petitions for new law on this problem to various countries. As of 2025, most consumer action on this matter has concluded, and we are awaiting decision on it from several governments. That's here. However, there are a few remaining avenues left where people can participate if they are eligible. The European Citizens Initiative is open. European citizens. Okay, wait. Okay, so I am aware of efforts in games. There's a... I forget what they call it. They always have a really cool booth at GDC. And I've only been to GDC like a couple times, but I've seen it every single time. There's a group that's trying to preserve old games, and I think that's actually pretty cool. Games like books and media and all these different things, they are a part of our art, our history, our culture, and the idea of maintaining them and preserving them is pretty awesome. It's hard though. If you ever tried to get like a game you used to play on DOS to run on a modern system, it's not trivial. You have to go probably download something like to make it work, and it's not easy, and often there's bugs and issues and things like that. Like the original Mech Warrior. Like, go try to play the original Mech Warrior if it hasn't been updated by a publisher somewhere. So these things they end up getting sort of shuffled along, and maybe some of them are just totally disappearing. I think this has probably happened to a lot of stuff over the course of human history, though. Like, let's be fair. There's a lot of documents, books, things. I know there's movies. There's like a similar effort in the movie space to try to preserve movies from the past, because we realized that if they were on tape, which is an analog format, not a digital format, they're slowly decaying and being lost over time. I mean, digital decays over time too, but much more slowly. And so, as tape gets damaged, if you ever tried to I grew up when we had VHS tapes, like video cassette tapes, and they had literal like tapes that spooled, and that was how the thing played, and they decay, they sort of dissolve and they rot over time. They rust, not really, but that sort of thing happens. And so there's people that are trying to both take those, restore them, recover that, put it into a digital format. Totally cool. I like the effort there. I also recognize some of it will just be lost, and that's okay. The idea of the preservation efforts is something I'm more okay with. However, preservation efforts, like, that's not a stop killing games. That's a recognition that, like, hey, games get old too. Or games stop being supported, or you can't play games that you used to be able to play. You know, Star Wars Galaxies is a game I enjoyed for a while. Can't go hop on a server. Now, I can go hop on some servers that players figured out how to build, but players had to go put a ton of effort into that, and that's what it takes. It's in the same way that if I had that gas car, and we were all on electric grid, there was no way for me to get gas anymore, I would have to solve the problem. Like, we would have to solve the problem of how do I get gas, and that might or might not be worth it to me to drive my Hyundai Sonata around. So again, I like the idea of preservation, but that's not quite what this is talking about. That's simpler. That's like, hey, we could create a database that actually contains these. You may not always have the equipment to run it because those things also go out of date and break down over time. I still have, I think, a running Nintendo 64. I haven't fired it up in a while. But, you know, the number of running original NESs that are out there or like Ataris is going down as over time as they just break. And there's not really a good way for most people to fix them. Preservation, yes, but within limitations, and that is a museum or historical more effort than a protection of the consumer as a right to have and play all those games. While it can be frustrating being unable to act in other countries, the most effective action to take is to spread the word on these initiatives to those who are eligible to sign. If you wish to prevent video games from being destroyed so no one can ever play them again, please tell others about this. See, I don't like this framing. If you wish to prevent video games from being destroyed so no one can ever play them. Well, of course I don't want that. I don't want video games destroyed so no one can ever play them again. And yet, there's a lot of games that are out there that have gone into history and will never be known again. You know what? That's how everything is. Like, if it's slowly we move forward and the stuff gets left behind, it gets left behind. How are publishers destroying video games? Here we go. How are publishers destroying video games? An increasing number of video games are designed to rely on a server the publisher controls in order for the game to function. This acts as a lifeline to the game. When the publisher decides to turn this off, it is essentially cutting off life support to the game, making it completely inoperable for all customers. Designed to rely on a server the publisher controls. Again, there's the way this is worded is bugging me. Games require servers to provide players the things they need. So does that mean they're designed to rely on a server the publisher controls? Kind of. That's a very specific way of wording that. All right, companies that do this will often intentionally prevent people from repairing the game, also by withholding vital components. When this happens, the game is destroyed because no one can ever operate it again. And it's not destroyed. It still exists. It still exists probably with the publisher. Again, what you bought when you bought the game, you could still have on a hard drive somewhere. Companies often do this to intentionally prevent people from repairing the game. I love how they put repairing in quotes. By withholding vital components. That is potentially very important for them to maintain, like, I might have security stuff, or I might have important things that I don't want out there in the broader world available to everybody that's on my server-side code that would be required to build this. So if you can go figure out how to do it, which again, people have done in a lot of games, they've figured out how to make a server that runs the client for a ton of games out there, including like Star Wars Galaxies and others. I don't know how much support they got from the publisher on those, but if they didn't, or they did, it doesn't matter. They had to figure it out. There could be proprietary information in there that you just don't want to like shove out onto the internet. Maybe again, you make a copy of it. Maybe there's something around the preservation if there was some trusted like museum organization where don't worry, we're never going to let anybody access this, but we can use it now to run your server because we maintain this ancient hardware that also runs all the stuff you need to run. Okay, so yeah, this isn't destroyed. This is just we decided it was no longer financially viable to continue making this game, and that's okay. That's what happens. I don't know. Okay, all right. Why should people care about publishers destroying video games? While video games are primarily just for entertainment and not of much consequence, I disagree there. I think that they're a totally valid form of media that in the future they will be looked at as an art form, just like art is like ancient, Leonardo da Vinci. So there's a lot of art from a lot of like classic ancient artists from Pascal to, I mean, gosh, some of the stuff that Galileo wrote, he wasn't even an artist necessarily. Pictures, photos from some famous photographers. We've got stuff. I think that video games will share a similar place, even if they're more difficult to access or observe. Just like it takes time to listen to a song, it takes time to watch a movie, it takes a lot more time and a lot more effort probably to play a lot of the games if they had servers involved. But like, you know, I think that to say it's like not of much consequence, it's the biggest entertainment industry in the world right now. It's of a lot of consequence, whether you think it's good or bad. The practice of a seller destroying a product someone has already paid for represents a radical assault on consumer rights and even the concept of ownership itself. What? Again, gas, car, will you go all electric? What do I do with my gas car? I guess I can't use it anymore. You know, I have VHS tapes. What if I don't have a cassette, like a VHS player? Oh, I have to go buy one on my own. What if I can't find one that works? What if they're all broken? I guess I have to fix it. There's stuff on 8-track. I don't have an 8-track player. We have a record player downstairs, and we have records, but there's no one like owes me a way to play that record. I have to figure it out. These games are not, if they're not standalone products that just run on your machine and you can solve this, then why do you have rights forever to whatever is required to run it? You know, once, if I imagine if Uber was an app you bought instead of just downloaded for free or something, and like eventually it shut down and be like, well, you still need to provide me a taxi, like an Uber, even once the company fails. How? What are you talking about? These servers are shut down. The game requires a server. If this practice does not stop, it may be codified into law and spread to other products of more importance over time, such as agricultural equipment, educational products, medical devices, etc. It is important consumers maintain a basic level of rights so as to not be overrun by predatory practices. Additionally, video games are unique creative works. What do you mean if this practice does not stop, it will... Things go obsolete. I'm actually worried about the other thing. What if this law passes and then everything anybody ever used, regardless of what is required for it to run, has to be maintained by whoever made it in perpetuity, or they get like legal action. Sorry, you got to go to jail because a failed product you made has to be maintained forever because 3 people want to keep using it. All right, additionally, blah, blah, blah. Okay, the concept of destroying every existing copy of a book, song, film, etc. would be considered a cultural loss for society. Yes, I agree. And we don't like it when people and countries and whoever attempt to do something like that. We're not doing that in this case. You technically still can have the digital copy of whatever it was you bought. Back in the day, that was an actual disc. But even then, nowadays, you can still buy a disc for certain things. It still needs to attach to a server. That's because of how the game works. That's because of how player expectation changed. That isn't some conspiracy to destroy games. Okay, while a less recognized medium, video games still deserve to have basic protections against the complete and willful destruction of many of its works. Okay, I'm just disagreeing now. How is this campaign going to save video games? If companies face penalties for destroying copies of games, they've destroying just the framing. This is very likely to start curbing this behavior. If a company is forced to allow customers to retain their games even in one country, implementing those fixes worldwide becomes a trivial issue for them. That's correct. Although probably a very expensive one. It's trivial in some sense. It's might be very expensive and bad. So if destroying a game you paid for becomes illegal, again, they're not destroying the game you paid for. They're turning the servers off. Like, you still have the game you paid for, you can't use it, but it's still there, and they probably still have a copy somewhere in their data banks. So if destroying a game you paid for became illegal in France, companies that patch the game would likely apply the same patch to games worldwide. True. Aren't you asking companies to support games forever? Isn't that unrealistic? Great. Okay. He addresses my concern. No, we are not asking that at all. We are in favor of publishers ending support for a game whenever they choose. What we are asking for is that they implement an end-of-life plan to modify or patch the game so that it can run on customers' systems with no further support from the company being necessary. So if I'm just thinking about this right now as the industry goes through a contraction and everybody's trying to save money. It's like, okay, we got to shut off this server. This game isn't profitable and we don't have a good plan to make it profitable. Well, before we shut it down, everyone, we have to either release our proprietary code or rewrite something so that everybody could use this if they ever wanted to. And I think this doesn't necessarily respect the IP of the company, not just from the perspective of the game, which people paid for. Admittedly, they paid for that as a client side thing, but like our proprietary server technology, our IP. So now we have to do a bunch of work to make it so that you'd have to build this into the plan for whenever you started the game. And then what happens when the game gets updated, right? So let's say I did this thing came into play, and now we all have to legally create some pared down version that we could throw out into the world as game developers so that players could continue to play games forever. Oh, that sounds great, right? Yeah, well, that's expensive. That's exactly what we want our game developers and engineers and people spending time doing rather than making the cool game. But now somebody's got to spend time doing that. As they're spending time doing that, they're not doing the other thing that's important. And what if I patch? Do I have to constantly be updating? Because these things will get out of sync. This is one of the problems as you get more code bases that are interacting with each other. You don't know how one change might impact the other. So now I have to test my pared down version of what people might buy. This is like a can of worms. Again, it doesn't sound like it's like, oh no, we're not asking for that at all. You don't have to support the games forever. We are in favor of publishers ending support for a game whenever they choose, but they just have to give away a bunch of proprietary information potentially when they do, or somehow make it invest a bunch of time so that anybody could run these. Because some of these are run in very complex fashions between a cloud service and a on rails server somewhere, like a physical hard server somewhere. That all work together so the game can run. Games are not just, here's a bunch of code, it sits on your computer with assets and features and things, and now it runs. It's very interconnected. The whole internet, all of this stuff is very interconnected. Okay, anyway, we agree that it is unrealistic to expect companies to support games indefinitely and do not advocate for that in any way. Great. Additionally, there are already real-world examples of publishers ending support for online games in a responsible way, such as Gran Turismo Sport, published by Sony, Knockout City, blah, 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 Mega Man, Scrolls, okay, Duelist, yeah, fine. So some people have done this, they've released their code, they've done some work to allow that to be out. That's very cool. That's great. You know what? That they wanted to do that, great, good for them. Should anybody have to do that? Should some indie dev who made a game and it didn't work very well, but someone really wants it, have to release, figure out how to release his server if there was a server component to the game to the world? It's on you to figure it out. You have the client side. You have what you paid for. Aren't games licensed not sold to customers? Yeah, I thought we might get into this. The short answer is this is a largely legal gray area depending on the country. In the United States, this is generally the case, right? In other countries, the law is not clear at all since license agreements cannot override national laws. Those laws often consider video games as goods, which have many consumer protections that apply to them. Yeah, but there are also, there's different types of goods. There's goods that are expected to exist indefinitely. There's goods that are expected to have a shelf life. There's goods that are supposed to expire or be used up. So anyway, despite what the license agreement may say, in some countries you're indeed sold your copy of the game license. Some terms still apply, however. For example, you are typically only sold your individual copy of the game license for personal use, not the intellectual property rights to the video game itself. Right. Correct. Yes. Great. Isn't it impractical, if not impossible, to make online-only multiplayer games work without company servers? No, it's not. It would take time. The majority of online multiplayer games in the past functioned without any company servers and were conducted by the customers privately hosting servers themselves and connecting to each other. Yep, what a wild, crazy time that was. Games that were designed this way are still playable today. Yep. As to the practicality. Oh, by the way, games that were designed that way, we don't design them that way for a reason, and it's a player-focused reason. If we design them that way, having the client host the servers in, I'll give an example of Halo 2, led to all kinds of really crazy cheats being possible, because if you were the host, you could basically replace the game assets. And there's a lot of other examples of this happening. We've won when it comes to things like latency and cheating and a bunch of other things by having servers on the company side broadly as players. In the vast majority of cases, there's some games and edge cases where it's it would probably be fine if it was client hosted. But a lot of times, actually, when that's okay, games will do that when that's okay, and then they have to be careful about what they want to put out there if there is any proprietary information or whatever. As to the practicality, this can vary significantly. Right, if a company has designed a game with no thought given towards the possibility of letting users run the game without their support, then yes, this can be a challenging goal to transition to. And many of the people out there who are doing this are game devs who want to make other great games, not work on games that have failed and are no longer profitable and need to be shut down. And you're saying that if you run this and they did that, then they'd now be forced to go and attack that challenging goal, and it would be super annoying and a waste of a bunch of money, frankly. If a game has been designed with that as an eventual requirement, then this process can be trivial and relatively simple to implement. Yes, yep. Again, perhaps there's the thing I mentioned earlier about like patching and how that could get really annoying. Another way to look at this is it could be problematic for some games of today, but there is no reason it needs to be for games of the future. It would always be somewhat challenging because you're always putting your company's code out there in the ether where anybody can grab it. And we do value some of those things. There's a reason it's hard to reverse engineer code and things like that. Like, that's proprietary. It's the IP of the organization. It could be the strategic advantage or something like that at some point. And you say like, well, they shouldn't have that. Everybody should have access to it. Well, but like, watch out. That's a dangerous road to walk down where we all need to be basically providing all the code we ever write to anybody. There's this big AI war thing happening as everybody tries to get everyone onto their AI platform, and they're all using, most of them are using proprietary, if not completely, then at least partially proprietary code to do that. Should that just all be free? Again, I don't want a slippery slope, but like, there's a reason companies hold on to their code as valuable IP and proprietary things that they don't just put out there into the world. What about large-scale MMORPGs? Isn't it possible for customers to run those when servers are shut down? Isn't it possible? Not at all. No, this happens all the time, actually. Again, yeah, I agree with him here. Limitations can apply. Several MMORPGs that have been shut down have seen server emulators emerge that are capable of hosting thousands of players just on a single user system. Not all will be this scalable, however. For extra demanding video games that require powerful servers the average user will not have access to, the game will not be playable on the same scale as when the developer or publisher was hosting it. By the way, what this means also, this is expensive to do. And the code is probably difficult to set up. That said, that is no excuse for players not to be able to continue playing the game in some form once support ends. Yeah, like when I see this, that's no excuse. You have to let them keep playing it once support ends. No, I disagree with that. I think that that's incorrect. I think that that's misguided. I think that that'll hurt players because it'll distract game companies. It'll have them doing a bunch of stuff that wastes a lot of their time. Frankly, I know someone out there is like, yeah, but I really want to play this old game I can't play anymore. Sorry, there's those game companies are trying to stay in business. This is going to waste their money. And that's why they've actually chosen to end support for the game, because it's not profitable. Okay, so if a server could originally support 5,000 people, but the end user version can only support 500, that's still a massive improvement from no one being able to play the game ever again. You know what? Back engineer it. Figure it out. All right. If you have 500 people, who all really want to play the game and we're willing to keep shelling out $15 a month, I guarantee you can all pool together if you want to and go pay someone to figure it out, to solve it, to try to figure out how to get a server working. But you do not have a right to the company doing all that extra work once the game is no longer considered viable. I don't think so. Can you really expect all features in an online-only game to work when support ends? Not necessarily. Oh, okay, it's interesting. Okay, so we understand some features can be impractical for an end user to attain if running a server on an end user system. That said, we also see the ability to continue playing the game in some form as a reasonable demand from companies that customers have given money to. See, this depends. Again, there is a bit where it comes down to like, what type of good is this? How do you view it? But I disagree. Like, you give money to companies, you get something. I think if there was some thing that just everybody just assumed that forever I would always be able to play this game or watch this VHS or 8-track or record, or again, the gas car in an electric grid world. If we somehow like made this assumption that of course I'll be able to use this forever, but that's not how it works. There's a reality that technology changes, it updates, obsolescence happens. When that happens, sorry, it's obsolete. We don't do that anymore. If you can figure out a way to solve it on your own, that's fine. You're welcome to do that. But no one is obligated to continue to support an obsolete thing. There is a large difference between a game missing some features versus being completely unplayable in any form. Yeah, that's a gray area right there. Okay, wouldn't what you're asking ban online-only games? No, not at all. I think that, in fact, we are seeking would interfere with any business activity whatsoever. Nothing we are seeking would interfere with any business activity whatsoever while the game is actively being supported. Yeah, I don't buy that. It would make it harder. It's not a ban on online-only games. It is a complexity added to the developers. And this is the thing. The regulations we are seeking would only apply when companies decide to end support for games. At that time, they would need to be, by law, they would need to be converted to have either offline or private hosting modes. Until then, companies can continue running games any way they see fit. But this is something that they would all have to keep in mind because they would be liable legally for it. And by the way, some companies do this. Great. Credit to them. They have the time, they have the bandwidth, they want to build that player goodwill. You could make an argument that maybe companies should do that. Maybe it's the right thing to do for the value of the IP and the credibility with players that hey, they care about us and all these different things. But I can imagine a place where there are companies of various sizes that would be like, hey, this is actually going to be quite a hit to us. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be frustrating. We have to reverse engineer the servers for this thing in a way that we could put out there, and we don't have any of the people at the company that worked on that anymore. So we have to go find people who can reverse engineer what we did. That sort of stuff happens as people move around the industry and leave companies and whatnot. I think people are just oh, it's just easy. Just make it work on someone's own computer, someone's home server. It's not easy. And again, there's the idea of the protection of the IP that goes along with it. And so if I remove that, the game wasn't as good anymore. And again, they mentioned earlier, well, that's fine, it's still available. Isn't it unreasonable to ask this of free-to-play games? Oh, interesting. While free-to-play games are free for users to try, they are supported by microtransactions, which customers spend money on. Yeah, but not all customers spend money. But some did. Yeah, that's right. When a publisher ends a free-to-play game without providing any recourse to the players, they are effectively robbing those that bought features for the game. No, they're not, depending on what type of good you see. Hence, they should be accountable to making the game playable in some fashion when support ends. No. I mean, I get your argument. I understand where you're coming from, but that they should not be accountable for that. Our proposed regulations would have no impact on non-commercial games that are 100% free, however. And so, by the way, that actually hits an idea of non-commercial games that are 100% free. Those still need to be preserved. So really, we are talking here not necessarily about the preservation of old video games. We are talking about, hey, I paid for a thing, I should be able to have it forever. And I think also, to think about this, I'm wearing this shirt, right? How long can I wear this shirt? Depends on how much I wear it, depends on what it goes through. I've got 2 small children, maybe it'll get torn up at some point. This shirt may no longer be really wearable in a few years. It might last 20. It might last 30. At some point, this shirt is no longer going to be good, but I paid for it. Should I have it forever just because I paid for it, or is it okay that it decayed? I still have it, even when it's, either got so many holes in it or is torn up or whatever, or the colors are wrong, or all the little decals here have fallen off or started to fray or something like that. Is this shirt still guaranteed for me as some sort of right because at some point I paid for it? I don't think so. And this is what's interesting, is everything that I have, all the objects on my desk, will someday break down, will fade, decay, become less useful. My USB drive and my sticky notes and this little rubber band that I already tied a knot in so that I could still use it as a rubber band. All these things are already broken, right? And I kind of fixed it on my own so I could still use it as a rubber band, or just, play with it as a fidgety thing. These things decay. What's fascinating about this, and maybe this is just what's clicking into me now, games are digital. And as I mentioned earlier, analog things, things that are sort of material stuff like this, you can see is already falling apart, my little thing to, put my cup on. They decay because they're just in the world, and because air moves and they slowly, rust happens and they fall apart and they're used and the water gets into them and breaks them down, or whatever it is, dust accumulates and that can cause issues with certain things. My computer goes down eventually. What's interesting is digital stuff has a much longer life, because if I just have something sitting on a hard drive, it can survive for a very long time, especially if it's regularly backed up. Everything I buy, I have an expectation that it's going to break someday. Or if you're buying stuff and you don't have that expectation, you're going to learn the hard way in life that no matter what you thought was just the most awesome thing that'll work forever, it won't. Maybe a paperweight somewhere, a really plain paperweight. But even that, you could break it, or you could drop it and it could break, and all these different things. Stuff wears out. End of service for a game are games wearing out. And it's digital, so the game, the digital copy of the game still exists. It's still valid as a game, but it doesn't decay in the same way. But it does decay from a product support perspective. So just like this shirt will someday no longer probably be wearable by me at some point, some decades in the future, or maybe years. And all the things that I see around me, all the products that I own, from my lamp to light bulb to the, my joystick in case I ever play a flight sim again, books I have, everything, it's wearing out. Games wear out too. It's okay. Isn't the law on this already settled? It mostly is within the United States. Well, there's something I agree with the United States on, but not in many other countries. Many existing laws are not written for a scenario where the seller destroys the product sold to the customer after the point of sale, since this is not something that normally happens in the real world. The fact that there is so much ambiguity on this practice is part of why we're pursuing so many legal avenues. And again, for me, this is ridiculous. This is like I get that there's sort of a rights collision happening here. I paid for a thing. I want to use it forever. That's nice. I would like to buy one car my entire life and never have to buy another one. That's not how the world works. My car goes obsolete for a set of reasons, including just it breaking down. And then I need to get something new. And we actually rely on that as regulations change and cars become safer. We don't make everybody who has a car, that was made a while ago, they don't immediately have to just stop using their car when the regulation changes. But we grandfathers them out because eventually that car that, we still allow it to run on the road even though it wouldn't be legally produced today. Eventually it just sort of, it dies. They all die eventually and then they stop being run. But some of them are still preserved, and in the U.S., you get to see car shows of really old cars. Some of them have actually been updated to be safer. Some are relatively unsafe compared to modern vehicles. But hey, it's kind of cool. They're there. They're old. They are used in very specific, narrow ways. They're more like the museum, the historical preservation, just owned by private citizens. You can do that if those things still look good. If someone's got a Model T, a Ford Model T out there that they've maintained, believe me, they've put work into that thing. And they've put money into that thing to make it work on their own. It wasn't on Ford to make sure that Model T was still valid to drive in perpetuity. It was on the individual who had it to maintain it. You got a game, cool, here's your data. I only have the client, I don't have the server. Well, you need to figure out the server then. That's on you. Wow, there's a lot of questions. I don't think I'm going to go through all of these. Wouldn't what you were asking for the company to give up its intellectual property rights, isn't that unreasonable? No, we would not require the company to give up any of its intellectual property rights, only allow players to continue running the game they purchased, because those aren't the same thing. Not quite, but in no way would that involve the publisher forfeiting any intellectual property rights. Okay, so two things to say here. One, technically true, only allow players to continue running the game they purchased would allow either sometimes companies creating something custom that doesn't have anything that they don't mind being out there in the wild, or what they're saying is it doesn't forfeit their intellectual property rights, but it does put a bunch of their stuff out there where anybody can look at it. In some sense, that is them losing whatever competitive advantage their intellectual property would have given them. So I feel like the wording of this is you're just drawing this narrow line. Wouldn't this be a security risk for video game companies? Not at all. Oh, said very confidently. Disagree with him there. In asking for a game to be operable, we're not demanding all internal code or documentation, just a functional copy of the game. No, you're asking for a functional copy of the client and the server, if there's a client server, plus whatever else might be involved with making that thing run. I just want a functional copy of the game. No, you don't. The functional copy of the game is what you got. The problem is you don't have anything to connect it to. They sold you the game code, right? You got the client. That there's nothing to connect it to is your problem now. It would be no more of a security risk than selling the game in the first place. Oh my goodness. Disagree. Again, companies could spend money to solve that problem, but why should they? Won't asking for this harm developers? It is very unlikely and is far more likely to benefit them. Now here I wonder if he's right. So I don't think we should force this. I do not think we should go to a legal place to force this. I really disagree with most of this, as you can probably tell. But if you're a developer, you might be able to gain cred with players by doing something like this. So many video game developers have voiced their dissatisfaction with having a game they spent years of their lives working on destroyed by the publisher. Well, then they can reverse engineer it. They know about it. Being powerless to stop it. I get it. That's tough. By the way, there's even more people out there that have worked on games that never saw the light of day, that no one ever sold, that just go into an icebox somewhere, and they've spent years and years of their life and nobody's even saw what they played. So, again, if we're making this argument of but the devs would like this too, kind of, be careful. Because yeah, it would be great sort of to see all those games that didn't see the light of day make it, but often there's a reason they didn't see the light of day. And that there's a bunch of different ones. It doesn't necessarily mean the game was terrible or anything, but some of them probably weren't very good. And that's why they got iceboxed. So anyway, yes, but this is an emotional appeal to video game developers have voiced their dissatisfaction. Yeah, a lot of them are dissatisfied that games they worked on that never got sold didn't get sold either. It doesn't mean that someone has to publish them. It's an emotional argument. By having laws requiring the game to function, it would help their work and legacy endure. I mean, kind of. Like, the legacy's already there in the players that they impacted. Like, stuff gets old, you know? How many people have watched a silent movie from the 1920s? I've seen bits and pieces of them. I don't know if I've ever actually fully watched end-to-end a 1920s silent film. So, that might be sad if you were somebody who worked on those films. By now, you're not alive anymore, in all likelihood. But, you know, that might have been sad as even 50 years ago, maybe nobody was watching those. The legacy was there when people watched it and played it, and now it's past. It is possible a small number of developers could find new requirements problematic if they were unprepared for them. That is true, and that could be expensive and annoying. But we anticipate that if implemented, there would be a significant lead time, giving developers time to prepare for the changes. Again, I don't want game developers to have to think about this and focus on this and build this into their long-term plan. Won't this bankrupt video game companies? A, it is extremely unlikely. Yeah, it depends on the company, but, you know, that would probably be a rare case. It would just be a tax. And some would be fine with that tax, or like they would survive. Others, that might be more impactful to them. The costs associated with implementing this requirement can be very small, if not trivial. If that's true, in some cases, this would probably be very, very easy. Furthermore, it often takes a company with large resources at its disposal to even construct games of this nature in the first place. Incorrect. And becoming more and more incorrect over time. Small developers with constrained budgets are less likely to be contributing to this problem. Yeah, there was a point where I think that was true. I don't think that's as true today. Isn't what you're asking for impossible due to existing license agreements publishers have with other companies? For existing video games, it's possible that being sold cannot have an end of life, that some being sold cannot have an end of life plan as they were created with necessary software that the publisher doesn't have permission to redistribute. Games like these would need to be either retired or grandfathered in before the new law went into effect. For the European Citizens Initiative in particular, even if passed, its effects would not be retroactive. So while it may not be possible to prevent some existing games from being destroyed, if the laws were to change, future games would be designed with end-of-life plans to stop this trend. It's interesting here, there's sort of this recognition of, like, we can't make the other companies also force... We can't force the other companies to also continue to support this game, but we can force the company that made it to support it. Well, who did you pay money to when you bought your game? You paid money to Steam. Oh, okay, so maybe we need to make Steam do it, because they're the ones who got the money. They need to support the games forever. Well, no, but they spent okay, how many jumps do we require people to potentially give up or have to do a bunch of work, like give up some proprietary information or IP, whatever, or do a bunch of work? Again, this is, if you want to view this as a right, and I don't think it is a right, you don't have a right to them in perpetuity. You don't have a right to your game forever, just because you bought it. So whatever you got, whatever you downloaded, if you brought it on a disc, you can still have that. That's fine. But you don't have a right to play that game with everything that might be involved to play that game forever. So that's me going through the FAQ. Overall, not a huge fan of this. Yeah, I would buy it more, actually, if it was for the preservation of old games in some way that you, like, could you create some organization preserved old games, which again, some people are trying to do, like a video game museum type of thing, like a database. You'd want a lot of security around that, because then if companies were like putting their proprietary stuff into that in order to, like, oh yeah, here's the server version so that the clients could play, and, you know, at some point in the future you could take out I don't know, I'm trying to think, I don't actually know what games like initially had sort of server client architecture where the server was very, very important versus when it used to just be all client hosted. But wherever that break point was, you know, World of Warcraft and some early MMOs probably, like EverQuest and whatnot. But see, this is the thing. In both those cases, those games have player-hacked versions of this. And then there's like the legal battle between, and I get why, they're a subscription service payment, usually not a, but technically, actually for World of Warcraft, I bought a box. So I have to be able to play that box forever. Not if you don't pay a subscription, you don't. But I guess, you know, again, that's probably understood when you get started. But so the players have figured that out. They've solved that. They've solved the server side. It's on us. It's on us to keep our Model Ts working. It's on us to maintain our shirts so they work, you know, they last much longer into the future. It's on us to preserve our old, you know, the tape that old movies were on. It's on us to do that. There's no responsibility by the company that made that, some of which don't even exist anymore. There should not be a requirement for companies to maintain all the stuff they have ever produced that someone could pay for in perpetuity. We do that because we want to, because we value what would be otherwise lost. And that's okay. That's good. That is a good thing. It's what museums are. It's like why people pay money to go see stuff in museums. But not everything belongs in a museum. Not everything will make it. Some of it will be lost and gone, and some games will get shut down. It's okay. All right. With that, I'm going to wrap up this one. Maybe I'll also take a quick look at his video and do another react to that to see if I haven't actually seen that at all. Maybe that'll give me more insight, and maybe I'll change my mind. So far, not really convinced of that stance. So, all right, I will see you later. In game and software development, we spend so much time estimating, and it often feels like a burden that just takes a bunch of time but doesn't really add much value. My name is Benjamin Carcich. I've created a course called Advanced Estimation for Game and Software Development. This is actually something people out there asked for when I was looking at what would be helpful to you, what course could I build. Estimation was the number one thing you picked, and I can understand why. Everywhere I've gone in our industry and in software generally, I see teams struggling with estimation, fighting with a sense of false precision, and generally going through the motions rather than really getting value out of all the time they're spending. And in my time, both in the military, in software development, and game development, I've been able to successfully predict the completion of large projects. I've seen other people do the same, and so I know it is possible. If you want to be doing that for your team, if you want to be advancing your understanding of estimation and how it can help you, this course is for you. A quick overview of what we cover. We start by discussing the state of estimation today, why it's so challenging, and why are we all doing it and continuing to do it even though it doesn't seem to add that much value. Second, we talk about calibration, how we can become better calibrated estimators and train others to be the same. Third, we talk about how to get ready to estimate. Who should be estimating? What are we actually estimating? How do we set up ourselves to succeed and to avoid the individual biases and fallacies that prevent our estimates from being good? Finally, at least for early access, we talk about tools, techniques, the approach. What are the ways that you can actually create estimates that add value? And when should you not use those techniques and use others instead? In the future, we're going to be releasing even more modules where we cover things like how to estimate things that aren't just how long a project might take, but to think about money and resources and so many other things that we end up estimating, value and whatnot. The 6th and 7th modules talk about small and large scale estimation and really try to make all of what we've talked about so far practical. And those modules will be coming in the future. For right now, we're focusing on those first 4. And as a result, we're keeping this course in early access at a lower price. As more modules come out, that price will go up. So get it today while it is as low as it'll be, and you will get all the future sections as well as those first 4. It's already 15 hours of content and more than 20 worksheets, templates, and examples for you to take away. I also interject stories from my own experiences, both failures and successes, of how estimation has gone well and poorly and what you might be able to learn from those things. So there's a lot of tools here, there's a lot of resources. This is a problem we're all facing because we all spend so much time doing this, and I think we get way too little value out of it. I think we could be spending less time and getting more value and really helping our teams succeed, creating the software, the games that will really please our audience and players. If that's something you're interested in, check out the course.